This is Auteur Detour, wherein three film lovers travel through the filmographies of cinema's most important directors in hopes of finding a greater understanding on the other side.
Hello and welcome to Auteur Detour. We are talking about the Coen brothers movies, and we've moved up past their, what I now consider their shittier ones and into their just masterful period. Starting with Fargo.
I like how you're reading this out of a book. It's very Coen Brothers-esque, actually.
Yeah.
It's like a bound leather book, too.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I know, it's got Charlie Chaplin on the front.
Yes.
Okay, where was I? To me, this is the period of their movies that people think of when they think of the Coen brothers aesthetic. So it was after the critical and financial failure of Hudsucker Proxy. They reset both in financial scope and in personal scope and went back to their home state of Minnesota. The film is a tonal ode to cold white snow and white people. There are two diametric leads in Fargo. Although one of them, the moral center of the movie, Marge Gunderson, played to perfection by Frances McDormand, isn't introduced until a third of the way through the movie. The film opens with her counterpart, Jerry Lundegaard, played equally flawlessly by William H. Macy as a scamming middle management car salesman. In over his head from a botched financial scam. He hires two low-level thugs, the manic, fast-talking Carl, Steve Buscemi, and the brutish ogre Gare, Peter Stormare, to kidnap his wife in the hopes that they'll split the $80,000 ransom he expects will be paid by her rich father, Wade. Wade looks upon Jerry as a failure and constantly belittles him in such a way that the feeling of Jerry's insignificance and constant state of being two steps behind adds more and more weight to the load he's trying to juggle to get back above water. And of course, the plan goes awry. When en route from the kidnapping, Gare kills a highway patrolman and a car full of people who witnessed that murder. Enter Marge, the 7 months pregnant police chief, who immediately shows herself as the opposite of Jerry. She confidently and quickly pieces together the crime on the highway with authority but also charm. It's impossible to think of someone disliking Marge, which is evident when later she's asked by an old friend to dinner, and after she politely turns his advances down, he cries about his hard life, and then they leave as friends. She tracks the car from the crime to Jerry's car lot, and the two meet in a sequence playing up his falseness and her genuineness. Meanwhile, Carl and Gare's kidnapping of Jerry's wife goes further askew, until eventually Jerry's wife is killed by Gare just because she won't shut up. Her father is killed by Carl because Wade refused to trust Jerry with the ransom money. And eventually, Carl is killed by Gare and then fed into a wood chipper, showering the pristine white snow with red blood. Marge, then, is hit with her great realization. Upon learning that the friend that she met for dinner was in fact a liar, only attempting to lure Marge away from her husband, she's struck with the obvious, but to Marge, elusive truth. Sometimes people lie. She puts another visit into Jerry's lot, with that knowledge in her mind, and puts together his part in the crime. He flees and is eventually caught in his underwear and arrested. When Marge then finds Gare, she shoots and wounds him, and they sit in her prowler, him silent as ever. And she ponders, more to herself, why would you do this? I just don't understand it. She returns to her loving husband, excited about their future family and their life together, but you can faintly recognize in the coziness that there is also something sad, not a fear of the brutality and dishonesty she's seen, but of the void that is in, I just don't understand it. The critics and the audiences fell in love with the Coens, and it cemented themselves as not just indie darlings, but perhaps the generation's most sure-footed auteurs. What was your experience with the movie, guys?
It was like an emotional assault watching William H. Macy's performance. It is too much. It is. I could barely like keep my eyes open during it. The entire movie is like an ode to awkwardness. And like just like the way it captures like a kind of Midwestern passive aggressiveness and like juxtaposes that with like genuine niceness and kindness, and then juxtaposes that with like just cruelty and kind of sadism, and like it's something. It to me, this movie though is really interesting the way it like fits into their filmography, fits into their kind of history. And so, yeah, I feel like I have a lot to say about this one. What about you, Chris?
This is not only one of my favorite movies of all time, but it's got to be one of the greatest movies of all time, in my humble opinion. This is like everything I love in a film. I laugh my ass off. I'm like, whoa, what the hell's going on? Oh, yeah. I'm looking at it like drinking in some of the imagery. The sound is great. I mean, there's the performances. It's like one of my absolute. I have like very few films I could talk as highly about as Fargo. I absolutely love this film, and I've only grown to love it more and more as time goes on. We talk about their filmography, you know what I mean, and this brings in it really like fuses so many of the elements we've talked about before that are sort of disjointed or like pervade entirely their films before, and it blends them all together in this amazing movie and does it perfectly. It's absolutely one of my favorite films ever.
I had the same feeling about like how it fits into the timeline. We can just get right into that, because it really made me realize, like, aside from their first two out of the gate sort of, first an independent movie that they were just like brilliant movie, and then their attempt at like a screwball sort of wacky comedy. But the following three movies really felt like exercises in like, who are we? What are we trying to say? Where do we get our inspiration from? And then like they come out of that and it really feels like they just put that shit to work and made the best movie that they could possibly make. Like it was like they're using all the stuff that they were kind of exercising in those last three movies to me.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, I definitely think, the skills that I think I said something similar last time, just that those three movies felt like exercises in like very particular like extreme styles, but this movie doesn't feel like a culmination of all that. To me, it feels like they stripped everything kind of down in this one, and like I think the most shocking thing to me watching this movie was like the naturalisticness of the movie, the naturalism of the movie, compared to everything since Blood Simple. I mean, when the movie starts and William H. Macy like goes into the bar, I feel like we're back at Blood Simple. Like, you know what I mean?
I have this fucking note right
That's
here.
a great call.
Not just him going into the bar, because that was the Blood Simple bar. I know it wasn't, but it was. But also, it opens with like a car driving through inclement weather.
Yeah,
like it's fully like putting you in that same Blood Simple. Like watching these in order is the only way I would have caught that.
Yeah.
But it's like,
and I think they're back to like the again that same story thing that's kind of really powerful in their films about like somebody kind of just making some like a small mistake or definitely transgressing in a way that they don't feel like is gonna be like all that wrong, and then of course it goes bad and like everyone suffers around them.
I feel like that was like, we're always talking about what is the motifs and what are the like things that they're trying to, what's the story that they're trying to tell. And like they fucking blew out their circle thing in Hudsucker Proxy. Like they ran that shit down our throats. And then, I feel like they were kind of done with it. I mean, I know it comes back and it's ever present in their movies, but like this one really laid into that like thing that we talk about that's really more at the heart of what they do, is less about cycles. I think that's a part of it, but it really is about just like how shit spins out of your control. And I think it has a lot to do with their control. I mean, Jerry, like William H. Macy's performance, you talk about being an ode to awkward. It's also just like you watch him, he never has control, not from the very beginning. Like even like, you know, when he walks in the bar, he's an hour late. You know what I mean? Like there's not a moment when he's like in control of the situation.
Things,
Yeah, he even forgets he has a son at one point. I'm like, every time there's a kid in the movie, he's like, oh, wait a minute. He's a moment of realization. He has like, oh no, what about little Billy?
God, I love that character. I mean, the only kid in the movie, besides the unborn kid, obviously, that's not like, there, but like that kid, I love that aspect of the movie, how like, he's the only one, because, Marge, like, Frances McDormand isn't incredibly empathetic of any of the crimes or anything like that. And, Jerry's like the opposite of empathetic. And the only time in the movie that you see somebody like feeling what's actually happening is when he walks in and his kid is like, he's like, can't handle the sadness that his mom's gone and that he doesn't know where she is. It's like, it catches you into that moment where you're like, oh yeah, like you forgot she had a kid, like in a lot of ways. And then like,
totally.
You're like, oh shit, like, so good.
And I think that was done really like, consciously to like when they bring the kid in just to kind of like hit you with it,
Right.
And I mean, that's one thing that this movie does really like slyly. Again, in that first movie, Blood Simple, it was like, we're just going to pile on the like kind of like the tension and the kind of like suspense. This one, they use all those tools like, but in stuff spinning out of control in a way that feels like almost believable. When the car drives by, it's very similar to the scene in Blood Simple where the car almost drives by him as he's dragging the body, but instead of like ratcheting up the like intensity just for kind of a thrill, this one feels a lot more like, oh shit, you know what I mean? It just feels like you're in that moment in something that could feel like, I mean, it feels like a true crime story or something like that. But I guess my point is like their masterful use of tension and kind of like film noir and like horror tropes are like being implemented in a very in a more naturalistic way.
I read Roger Ebert's review. Did you guys look at that at all?
No, I didn't.
He it's in one of his favorite movies of all time. He had it on like his best list of the year, but then also going forward like of the best movies of all time.
Yeah.
And then he he says in the review, he's like, the way that they just keep, I mean, it's a short movie, it's whatever, it's like an hour and a half or a little longer. But,
yes.
The way that and I love that.
Unlike the last three movies, right? Here. They cut like a half hour off the runtime, like the first two movies, and it feels, and you feel like
works.
It. Yeah.
But, he just says that like, it's so perfectly steadily moving forward that like you just are in it with the movie the whole time. So like, it's not like a breakneck pace by any stretch of the imagination. Like it's slow, but it's like the tension is just building within you.
Unlike their last couple movies, there's basically, from my recollection, one kind of montage, which is just Marge driving around in like 3 or 4 shots, ordering a hamburger, and then kind of thinking, wait a minute, like that's the closest thing to like a montage in this movie.
There's also no dream sequence in the movie, which is true, like different for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder like if that's something that they cut. I also wondered if they cut maybe any kind of narration, because that was also missing, and they're pretty big about that usually. Yeah.
It's funny you guys say that, especially about how like short it is and how everything fits, because the first time I saw it, I didn't quite get everything, and there's a specific scene talk about ode to awkwardness where Mike Yanagita, played by Steve Parks, finally meets up with her in the restaurant. And the first time I saw the movie, like, why is this in this movie? And then I realized this is great. This is one of my favorite parts in the whole movie. It's like, and it really shows you Marge's character, but it feels in the moment like, what's going on here? And, she takes advantage of this, chance meeting in Minneapolis, but like, oh, no, don't sit next to me. Sit across the way. That way I don't have to turn my neck to see you. She turns on the Minnesota nice while trying to like deflect the awkward situation. But it gives you a lot of insight to her character. It doesn't slow the movie down. You know what I mean? It's like one of those examples.
Like, I mean, I brought it up in the intro specifically of all the scenes in the movie, because that is what I consider like the one twist of the movie is when he turns out to be a liar. Like when she gets the call after their, nice but awkward dinner, And then she gets the call that like, oh, his wife didn't die of
He doesn't have a
cancer.
wife.
Like he
Yeah.
doesn't have a wife.
Right.
Like he was just a crazy, liar.
Mhm.
And then like that was the moment where like she immediately goes back to Jerry after that, and she's got this like, it's also the saddest you've seen her in the movie. Like when she, she's not affected by the murders she's seen. She's like, the only time you really see her kind of look a little bit like she got punched in the face is when she finds that out, and she feels like, oh, like men will just lie to your face,
But is she
And then
like,
she goes-
yeah, I mean, is she suspicious of Jerry though? Or is she just thinking, or yeah, I mean, what is she thinking in those scenes? I don't know.
I think in that moment, not in that exact moment, but like after she learns that, and then there's like a moment of her driving around and thinking, then like I think that that's when she goes like, oh, he was lying to me. Like that's why like none of this makes sense. It's just because like she didn't put it together in that first meeting because she's so like, just takes people at their word. Like it's the Midwestern way, And then like in that moment, she's like, oh, like when he said like, no, like I just believed him. Like, why did I believe him? And so she's like, and then,
Yeah.
it just falls apart for him right there.
Yeah.
I see that as like, it's absolutely a moment, like you say, where it shows her like outside of work and outside of her husband, which is important, but also like it's, it was like a turning point for her in her like figuring out the crime to me.
Right.
I don't know, even though it has nothing to do with the crime.
I've also, at that point in my life, I think I had never seen a scene like that was just about like how messed up somebody can be, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Right, exactly.
I mean, you think he's messed up in one way, and he turns out to be messed up in like a totally other way. And
Right.
I mean, I think the Coen brothers are kind of interested in those kind of characters. Like, why are people like this? You know what I mean? Like, what do you do with how do you deal with people like that? And like, how do you deal with all these kind of weird criminal people in this movie? It's
I wanted to say this, like, I didn't think of it until now, but I had thought of it before, is that like, I think that like, sadly for me, or maybe not, but like the kind of asshole that the Coen brothers like write about, I see a lot of myself in them. And I'm not talking about like necessarily the Mike character or the Jerry character, but like the Steve Buscemi character for sure. And then like the later on, I don't think you've seen it, Travis, but like Inside Llewyn Davis, and like people hated that movie because, or didn't hate it, but like it wasn't as well reviewed because people are like, he's an asshole. And I'm like, yeah, he is an asshole, but like it's like such a relatable kind of asshole. And like we gotta get into Steve Buscemi in this too, because he's the like, I don't know, it's his best performance ever as far as I'm concerned.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
And like
Definitely.
his kind of, like, I watched that movie this week. Did you guys watch it, the documentary on Hulu? It's called In and of Itself. It's that like, it's not a documentary, it's like a filmed stage show.
This is
Have you heard about
the
it?
one by
The Magic.
Kermit the Frog, or what's his name, Miss Piggy.
No.
Yes,
What is
yes,
that?
yeah, it was
Oh
just-
yeah, Frank Oz.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
Frank
directed by
Oz
Frank
directed
Oz,
it.
yeah.
You're right. Yeah, absolutely. It's a roundabout way
I
to
forgot
say
his
that,
name.
but-
I forgot his name. Sorry.
It's okay.
Only
Yeah,
remember his
it's
greatest character.
great.
No, but
It's
what's it
great,
about?
But it's all about, it's a magician's show that aired. There's only like 5 magic tricks in it, but like the conceit of it is that he's trying to get you to like reckon with that the way you define yourself isn't as simple as like I am a teacher, or I'm a artist, or I'm a musician, or whatever. So like he takes you through an hour and a half, and you wind up on the other side of it. It's a really good thing. It's it's hard to watch a stage show on film.
I've heard
but,
it's like Nanette, but for magic.
sure.
The Nanette of magic.
yeah, it is, absolutely. But anyway, the reason why I bring it up is because I liked it a lot, and I'm not gonna lie, like I wept like everybody else did at certain parts of it, but the fucking scene where Carl, Steve Buscemi, is yelling at the parking lot attendant, and he says basically the same thing to the parking lot attendant that this like documentary like got took an hour and a half to say, where he's just like, suppose you think you're some kind of fucking authority, huh? fucking King Clip-On tie. He's like, the rules of your reality. These are the rules of your reality. Or he says, like, or these are the parameters of your reality. Fucking piece of shit, whatever, you know? And I'm like, that's how I, like, approach that. And it's sad, but true. Like, it's like, I'm an asshole. That's what I'm trying to say now. But, like, I do, like, see that character that Carl is playing in this. And like how frustrated he is when fucking Gare's not talking to him, and how like, you know, he's bigger than the small town, but he's also not like, he's not, you know, he's a fucking low level thug. But I don't know. I just love that they have found a way to write that kind of character. I don't even know who else like attempts it, you know?
Yeah, totally. It reminded me of the character, I can't remember, Cher's dad from Blood Simple, whatever his name is.
Dan Hedaya.
Yeah, so him in Blood Simple, where he's just like, sees himself in these kind of like mythic proportions, you know what I mean? As like, he's just this like kind of creep,
right?
You know, run of the mill asshole. Right. Yeah, I don't know. That is something they keep coming back to.
Well, actually, Blood Simple is like one of those ones where like every one of the main characters is that guy. Like they aren't all like in the same way, but they're all kind of shitty assholes, but that like are a kind of shitty asshole that you can kind of relate to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know.
I don't think Frances McDormand is that bad in that movie, but I mean, she's cheating on her husband.
Yeah, but like a lot. But, yeah.
But he sucked. Oh yeah, we got another sex scene in this movie, so that was made it worth it.
Yeah,
for
we
me.
did. I did. I noticed that.
Another like
a couple actually.
Again, making the point to like, you know, highlight the kind of awkward after time in the like seedy motel room watching.
So you were having sex with the little fella. Oh yeah. They're just so open and candid about it too. I love that. Go Bears, you know? I love that conversation between Marge and the two prostitutes. It's great. It's just so good. She's probably the best written and best conceived female character in their entire lexicon. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Easily. And I'm a big film noir fan, but I'm hard pressed to think of another like neo-noir, if you want to call it that stars a female detective. You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't happen really very often. And I think that's awesome. That and the fact that she's pregnant. That's such a great nuance. And I think, like, pregnant women are incredibly underrepresented. And it happens so often, you know what I mean, in the real world. But, like, pregnancy, I mean, my wife deals with, like, you know, sexual health and whatnot. And, you know, it's really interesting when we point some of these things out that pregnancy is an issue that's just completely left to like outside of the film, right? But she's just such an amazing, rounded character, and she plays
literally
it
and figuratively.
Perfection. Yeah, exactly, right?
There's actually one moment that I thought was interesting. So she is out like looking at the bodies, right? And then she's like, ugh! And she like keels over, and you're like, and the guy is like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Oh no, just morning sickness. It passed." And then she's totally fine. Do you guys think that was just morning sickness? In her mind, I think it was just morning sickness. But I'm reading a book right now called "The Body Keeps the Score." Have you ever heard of that? It's about the way like trauma is stored in the body. And that like it kind of like the way it works in kind of like a subconscious way. And he tells this story about like this aunt who like, I don't know, was like a Holocaust survivor or something like that. But she would come visit his family every year and would like barely speak as they tried to like, you know, like engage with her. But she would like always be cleaning and saying how grateful she was to stay there. And when she would leave, she would at the airport every time tears streaming down her face. And she's like, I guess it's just really cold. And, like, he sensed no, like, irony from her or any kind of, like, consciousness of it. But she's like, I guess it's the wind and the cold is making my eyes water. And he's just like, no, you're crying. You know what I mean? And I just thought it was interesting, like maybe in that moment, like, you know what I mean? She was having a reaction to everything happening around her, but her, like, Minnesota disposition, like, this sunny, like, kind of outlook that, like, powers her through this movie would not, like, allow her to, like, have that moment.
Yeah, I think, to me, I think it was... my read on the pregnancy like aspect of her character was that it was important for them to show like, I mean, for her, she like said this in an interview that it was important to her to have like a character that was pregnant, but that wasn't the defining part of her personality. Like that was part of them like creating a strong woman. I think that was important to them. And like, I don't know if it was her idea or if it was in the script, but it was like important to her that she was just like, I want her to be pregnant and I don't want them to like address it really. You know what I mean? Like I just want her to like that to be a fact of her life. But then I think like when it does show up in the small moments that it does are in that scene when she, you know, has morning sickness, like at the exact moment that she's looking at a dead body, which is like absolutely either played for comedy or to show that she's not affected by it, or it is like, you know,
it can be both. It can be both.
Yeah, it could be both.
I
but the other place that it shows up, besides obviously like when she's talking to her husband at the end, Norm.
Final line of the movie, yeah.
But is when she's watching the Bark Beatles documentary, which is like the only thing close to a dream sequence in the movie or a montage is like that her and the, you know, other fucked up family of Gare, Carl, and, you know, Jerry's wife, I can't remember her name, Jean, you know, are both watching it at the same time and they're having these like parallel lives. And in that moment, like the documentary is about these mother bark beetle protecting her young. And you see like on her face, such a different like look than Gare's got on his face as he's watching it. And it's like, I don't know, that's the only other moment that like her pregnancy seems to like weigh on her at all.
I think
it's interesting.
Yeah, you know, and it kind of touches in a way. It's not explicit, but you know, your the idea of circles, Ian, and circularity and coming back around. I think in a way too, if you look at the end, and I don't know if you guys interpret it this way, but there's sort of a melancholy to the end, even though they're talking about like everything's sort of wrapped up in a neat bow. They're expecting this new child, but and it reminds me too of No Country for Old Men, wherein like there's a new generation that's going to come around and inherit this world, and this is a world that's beyond our control now. It's a world that we don't understand as we maybe once did, right? So I don't know, there's sort of like this circular nature to it, and I think having a child and being pregnant sort of leaves the door open to this possibility of this world now that is beyond our control, which clearly is one of those themes we are always touching on.
That's kind of what I was like alluding to in my intro, is that like she's, you know, she starts the movie as this incredibly confident, like if she's got an arc at all, it's that she starts the movie with this incredible like charm and confidence, comfortable with her like home life with her husband, you know, and like she ends the movie without saying anything, and there's no real, it's very subtle, but like with this little bit of gnawing kind of like, but what the fuck is the future gonna look like? I don't, you know, it's there, like it's scary.
And it is similar to No Country for Old Men. That's a really good point. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, when she shows up at the beginning, it's like at minute 33 I had on my Blu-ray player.
Yeah, and it's literally a third of the way into the movie.
And it's at the darkest point. Like it's just been nonstop. Literally everything everyone has done in the movie so far has like been wrong, has been bad, has had a bad result. And then it ends with him just shooting this like upside down defenseless woman in the car. Yeah. And it's just like the end of this like incredible 33 minutes of film that has just been like a downhill, like all downhill, like roller coaster. And when she shows up, like, I don't know if I could have taken another minute of like watching if she hadn't come in. And then she's just like a ray of sunshine.
She's so good at it too. Every fucking note that she hits is so perfect. Like, it's unbelievable, you know?
Yeah. Don't think I agree with your police work there, Lou. DLR, you know? Like, I was just like all kind about it, but she's always thinking. She's always smart,
corrects
you know?
Him
like,
and then tells the joke to kind of like cut the tension.
To diffuse it. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Perfectly done. Love it.
It's like a really great character, and like the way that they do it. Yeah, I really feel like they're amazing, like the way that they capture, again, like that Minnesota personality and stuff is like so incredible, and like the kind of awkwardness. The scene that just blew my mind was like the cop comes to check out the like lead of the random guy in the parka, you know, and they meet outside. Yeah, and then they like
exactly.
So he tells him the information, and he's like, and end of story. Yeah. And then the cop, and then he like looks up kind of over his shoulder as if somehow that gives him a better view, and he's like, oh, there's like clouds coming in. And then the cop kind of looks over his shoulder, turning away from him, and he's like, yep, there's a cold front coming. He's like, yep. And they're both sort of facing away, and then they just walk away from each other. So they don't have to like
perfect.
And end of story.
Yeah,
I love it so much.
Just the way that they walk away without ever having to make the like statement like, all right, thanks so much, I'll be in touch, goodbye. Like, you know, like it's just incredible, like social documentary in a way. I also think it's interesting, like, talking about the way they capture Minnesota, like, you know, I think you said something, Ian, about reading that they liked Texas. They were fascinated by Texas because it's so different than Minnesota. But in this movie, that those stark landscapes, I mean, are it gave me the same kind of feeling that you get in Blood Simple, where you're just like, there's just nothing there. You know, it's just this like kind of mythic like battleground. I don't know.
Yeah,
just nothingness.
I mean, I think they call it like Siberia with family restaurants or something like that. That's how they like referred to Minnesota.
It's bleak.
Yeah, and it is. And, you know, it does feel like, I know they got a little bit of like, if there was any pushback to this movie, it was from the Midwest, who were like, oh, you're talking down to us, that kind of thing. I didn't feel like that at all. Right? Yeah, they're fucking idiots. Just kidding. But no, I mean, I really felt like watching this, like they were so much more, like quite literally, like at home in that environment. Like it felt like they knew the people so perfectly. Like, I don't know. It felt like I didn't feel any of the criticism I've had in the past about like, oh, they're making fun of stupid people. Cause like, I don't know, it just felt like real to me. I don't know, it was too real.
I think it felt too real for a lot of people. I mean, I was reading something about how, well, one, there's the disclaimer at the beginning or whatever, the fake, this is based on true events. And people really ran with that to the point where I think people, right after the film was released, started running out there to like where the fence line is and just started digging, thinking like, actually there is some kind of money buried under there. And to the point where the cops had to be like, go home. Everybody stop digging up this was a movie, people. It wasn't real, Yeah.
Wow.
It's like, yeah.
What do you think about that as like the conceit of the movie, that it was based on a true story and then they found out like,
this is after like, it's talking about like the naturalism of the movie. It's so weird when they've already made a movie like Barton Fink where like even the grime in that movie feels so artful and like stylized, you know what I mean? That I can't help but think of like, even though they were working with a smaller budget, and the movie does have a style to it. I mean, it's a beautifully stylized, piece. Some of the like compositions of like the shots, like there's this one shot where I think it's Jerry walking up, like basically up the screen, like in this white like box with these little black trees, like kind of like a pattern.
Right.
Yeah.
Just some beautiful, beautiful stuff. But it's shot so naturalistically, like that too is a conscious choice of theirs. You know what I mean? And so it's like, what level of irony are they working on? And all the comedy, like from the other movies, it's still there. It's just played. It's just played in a naturalistic kind of way. Like it's like they took the kind of Jim Jarmusch kind of quirkiness away, but left like all the kind of same like observations and the same kind of comic timing. It's just like, you have to be a master to be able to kind of like turn your knobs to the point where like this will hit at a level where you won't consciously conceive that it's a joke, that it's just like, that it's just style. You know what I mean? I don't know how to like even approach that, but like I was just very conscious watching this after the other ones and being like, well, this is also just as fake. And the fact that it's based on a true story, like almost calls to attention the fact that it's fake.
Yeah. Huh. There was a documentary. Did you guys ever hear of it? I never watched it, but it was about some, I want to say it was a Japanese woman that like came all the way to Fargo to try to track down the treasure because she never found out that it was not based on a true story.
I think this is a fictional film that you're thinking of, unless I'm wrong, but is it Kumiko the Treasure Hunter? I think it's a fiction
I've
film.
only heard about it. I've never seen it, like I said.
So I did see it. My wife actually won a contest to win a bunch of like swag based on that movie. So like she got like a cassette tape of the soundtrack and like a pin. And it's about kind of like an insane woman played by Rinko Kukushi. Is that her last name? And she's a wonderful actress. The movie has a kind of like student film feel to it, but it's it is, if you're a big Fargo fan, it might be worth it.
No, you're that's actually right. I'm looking it up now, Travis, and you're totally right. Yeah, Kumiko the Treasure Hunter, basically. It's easy to find a VHS copy of the film Fargo, and exactly. I was gonna say, speaking of Fargo, like spin-offs, have you guys seen any? I haven't watched it, but I guess there's a pretty popular series now. Coens are producing or whatever.
Yeah. I've
About
seen all of them.
Oh, okay. I know we're just talking about the film, but
What's it like?
Yeah, I mean they divorce themselves from it completely. Like they say they consider it fan fiction and like don't have no part in it. You know.
Yeah.
okay.
And I fucking loved it. Like I especially season 2. Every season it's it's an anthology series, so like every season is its own story.
Okay.
And season 2, like what the series does is again pretends it's a true story every time. Like it always opens with that, and then it just tells another sort of crime story about crimes getting away from people who can't control them, and they're really good. Like as far as series go.
So they're
Season
none of the
2
same characters at all.
The only character that plays through is a female cop, which is another like, nod to the movie.
Okay.
But it really doesn't have much to do with the movie at all. But it is really good. I mean, the season 2 was the Jesse Plemons, Kristen Stewart season, and that was like I watched that one and I was just like, this is like fucking good. Like it's up there with like better than some Coen Brothers movies in terms of the tone. Like it did really good.
I hate TV shows, but those are good actors, so that's cool. I love Jesse Plemons. He's great.
No. What else was I gonna say about it? Oh, just let's go really quick before too much time passes. Like we talked about how it relates to Blood Simple, and it's very like much inspired by that, or not. It's a sister to that movie for sure. But I think that like Raising Arizona, it also shares like even more DNA with in a lot of ways. Like
How so?
especially if you think of the fact that like the themes of, or I mean, I should say the character of Ed, Holly Hunter, and Marge, Frances McDormand, are both like female cops that are in charge of their, or she's a correctional, officer or whatever, but they're both like, that are also like in charge of their family, dynamic. And then, like the leader of the family, not just the leader of the police force. Like she's definitely like, not to use this terrible fucking expression. I don't even want to, but like, if I was going to use it, like, where's the
Super
pants of
bitch?
the family? That fucking bullshit. No, but like, she's just, she's the alpha in the family. So there's,
She's the Chad.
She's both characters are that. One is starting a family and one is like starting a family. Like they're both sort of on that track. And then there's the High and Jerry dynamic, which is like both are recidivist, like criminals. Like one, keeps doing crimes that are like building upon each other, this being Jerry, like who like starts one crime, it fails, so he has to do another crime to do that, then he has to do another lie to do that, like just keeps doing it. High, who just like keeps doing the same crime that is completely not, it's a victimless crime. And then like what High wants, like his dream at the end of the movie, his complete fantasy that it's all about, is for exactly what Jerry has and like doesn't care about, this like table with their family with multiple generations, like and like that's like Jerry's like absolute life.
In Jerry's defense, his family sucks. His father-in-law is like one of the most like
The
worst characters ever, and like I don't know, I hate that kind of like he's like the bad version of like so many Coen brothers, like kind of like asshole boss kind of characters, he's just like the worst version, like just completely full of himself, like not loving, not sensitive, not warm, and like I don't know. Even though like his daughter seems okay, like I like Jerry's wife.
She's fine. I mean, she's manically like stirring the whole movie. And, like,
she seems a little weird. She's a little high strung.
Yeah. Like there's part of me that's just like, just shut up. Like Jerry's gonna kill you. She won't shut up. And I know it's coming, but I'm like, come on.
Wait, when does she not shut up? That's not really in the movie. He just says that as an excuse to murder her. But like,
I guess she does quiet in the car. But she's, I don't know. If I was her,
whimpers a little bit.
I guess I guess that's.
If you were, what would you do if you were kidnapped at gunpoint, Ian? You do relate to Steve Buscemi. Oh yeah,
I really do.
I want to say more about the kidnapping of the wife actually, but I also just want to call out how good Peter Stormare, is that what you said? Peter
Stormare.
Okay.
That's how they say it.
Well, that guy rules in this movie. Barely any lines and
good.
such a presence. So good.
Totally.
But I also just wanted to say, like, as an example of like a scene or like that could have been played just again, like just turn that dial like a tiny bit to the like Jim Jarmusch side. And that whole kidnapping scene could have just been like a laugh riot, you know what I mean? Or like maybe it could have felt more like Raising Arizona, you know what I mean? But it's like it could have been played just for a little more surrealism, like a little more kind of like funny awkwardness, that kind of like those just kind of weird moments of like I need unguent, you know? But it's played kind of straight. But that humor is still there, and that kind of weirdness is still there. It's just played at a more naturalistic level, so it just hits different. But it's the same kind of thing, and it's like it almost.
We've spotted Kubrick stuff before, including Shining stuff. Did you guys feel that when they're breaking into the door with the? I spotted this time that when the crowbar is breaking through the door, that's an absolute like Shining moment.
Oh yeah,
with the axe chopping through the door. Like it's fully like bursting into it in the same shot almost.
Totally. Well, I felt The Shining was all over Barton Fink. But
of course.
Yeah, that's interesting. But
and also the snow in this obviously is like. You know, Shining-esque.
Yeah. I mean, and that was another thing about the snow. It gave it like almost like a black and white quality to it, because like the snow is white, the night is black, and then literally every human and structure is gray.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's just like a very black and white movie. Yeah,
absolutely.
There's like the Godard, I think, said. I sound like a fucking intellectual. Godard, I think, said.
As you whistle through your missing tooth.
I know, exactly. Excuse me, I have a full peanut inside of my hole in my mouth. He said, you know, when criticized about blood in his movies, he said, not blood, red. And I feel like that, like, he's, you know, it's about the color in that moment of like how stark the red is that they use like against the pit. Like they use the white snow as an absolute canvas for like anytime they want to show something drastic, you know, like it's the blood. I mean, obviously we haven't really touched on it. Like the iconic scene of the movie that like is most people's image of the movie, if they haven't gone back and watched it 10 times, is just Gare feeding Carl into the wood chipper and his fucking sock sticking up out of it. And it's like, that is such an iconic, it almost doesn't hit me anymore because I've just seen this movie enough. And also like so much is taken from this movie that like.
Even just as like just that phrase, the wood chipper, like, you know what I mean? Like that's just like a shorthand now for like just shocking violence that like
absolutely.
Came
was so
like
shocking,
I feel like I heard about it before I saw the movie, and then I've heard about it a million times like after, like growing up in the 90s. That was just like a reference point.
I actually earlier this week, I know we're kind of, you know, getting a little bit into this, but or into the time of this podcast, but Travis, I know this was your like first intro into the Coen brothers, right? Like you saw this one, you had maybe seen Raising Arizona before.
I don't think so. Right? I think this is my first one. Yeah, this is my first one.
Yeah. And what about you, Chris? When did you first see this movie?
I saw it after The Big Lebowski. So I think I want to say 99-ish, just before college, right around going to college. So yeah.
Were you partying at the time? Because that might be a clue that it was 1999. This not only was this my first Coen Brothers movie, but like this was like I was, I guess, like 14 when this came out, and I feel like the hype around this movie as not just like a pop culture phenomenon, but like as a, you know, a great film by great directors. I was just becoming conscious enough of like, you know, movie magazines and that kind of like literature and like critical consensus and stuff like that. So, you know, movies were kind of like becoming like a thing I could be into, like in terms of like reading about and like participating in some way, like as like, you know, in the cultural criticism as well, you know, not just like consuming them. And so I got really into like, everyone's saying Fargo's best movie of the year. I must see Fargo. That's the movie to see this year. And I was like, truly and then like at the end of the year, I was like, Fargo tops my list of best movies this year. And it was like Fargo and like Independence Day. Like what else came out that year that you saw at age 14? Like it was just.
I was actually going to bring that up because I saw in my notes that like this year, 1996, was a pretty terrible year for movies. Like I mean, aside from Fargo, and I mentioned, we said Dead Man came out this year too, which was, I love that movie also, Jim Jarmusch. But like it was really, if it was a like banner year for anything, it was like a major step forward in like huge blockbusters. And they're, now you look back at those movies, or at least I have, and they are so bad. I mean, you've got like Twister and Independence Day, like you mentioned. These were like the big movies of the year. I mean, the fucking best picture winner that year was The English Patient.
Yeesh.
And like, William H. Macy lost to, wait, who did he, I mean, I don't, whatever it was. They all lost to everything to English Patient except for screenplay and Frances McDormand, thankfully. But like you look at it now and it's like, imagine a world, not that the Oscars matter, but like imagine a world where The English Patient is better than Fargo. It's insane.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the one thing I would say about that is I feel like the Oscars were like, I don't know, they were more Oscars-y back then. You know what I mean? They were still like, they were looking for great movies of a type that did not exist anymore. And like, a movie like The English Patient harkened back
trying to be like
to like
David
an epic
Lean,
thing. Exactly. But
Right.
But if you go back, I think, and go back to the 90s and watch just the like standard movie of the 90s, you're gonna find like better stories, better directing. Like I would put any movie, like generic movie from the 90s against any generic movie today.
Oh, I'm just saying like specifically that year 96,
But, like,
which I remember like at the time even being like watching the Oscars, and I remember being like, I guess I'm rooting for Jerry Maguire. Like, I don't know, like,
Yeah, it's not a bad
like,
movie. That's not a bad movie.
No,
Train
it's not.
spotting.
It's good, but
Train
like,
spotting.
but you know what I mean? Like you're used to like, sort of more from the Oscars.
Okay.
I don't know.
I
maybe
did
not.
literally zero like research for this episode, but like I mean the movie, like I'm just thinking like a movie like The Craft. Like I know that came out in 1996, and that is like an amazing like wonderful movie that you just like, you don't find movies made like that anymore. Just like a classic, like it's like the 90s like Hollywood movie was like really good. And if you go back and watch something like that, or like Clueless, I think was like 1995, but like there were so many good strong movies coming out like that just weren't like hit you over the head like artsy, you know what I mean?
Well, but then that was also, I mean, we're right in the middle of like we're right really, still at the beginning of the like Miramax like owning fucking independent movies, like where it's like all the Tarantinos and the, Kevin Smith and like all these people that are like really bursting on the scene. And I feel like, none of them really did anything for a couple of years, like around this movie.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was just during this movie, but like, during this year, but like this movie, when I was reading through the movies of 96, because I did like went and looked just to see like what it lost against.
Yeah.
And I mean, normally I look at the screenplay for like what are
what's
the
actually
actual
good.
movies
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
year,
good call. Good call.
and like even in that, it won obviously for original screenplay, but it's like it wasn't fucking great. I don't know. Even at the time, like I remember, like you said, Independence Day and Twister were like, oh, this is what movies are.
I'll
now.
just throw out like, Twister, probably not great. I've never seen it. Independence Day, not good. But like, I think maybe it was like auteur cinema was not as big like at that time. Again, like there was like a list published at the end of the 90s, I remember, and it was like, who's the next Martin Scorsese? And one of the critics, like a really influential critic, said Kevin Smith. You know what I mean? Like that was like the state of auteur cinema in the 90s. Like I'm just saying, like I'm not like movies were the good movies of those years were not like the Oscar movies. Like, you know what I mean? I think there were a few kind of like auteurs like doing their own thing. I think the really strong movies is if you go back to the 90s and look at just like lower budget like genre movies. That's my theory anyway. But I mean I see what you're saying. Like there wasn't like high art happening in Hollywood.
Yeah,
and
I mean, but this
or it wasn't being
was,
recognized.
so,
You know what I mean? I mean,
that's
Bottle
a good
Rocket came
point,
out
too.
that year. Like that was Wes Anderson's
Rocket,
first film, right? It
right.
came out just
Bottle
a month
Rocket
or two.
was great, but I don't
Masterpiece.
think that it actually like I saw that one on there, but I didn't bring it up because I don't think that it actually like came out until later.
It was in
I think it,
February,
like,
I think. So I'm looking at the chrono.
Well, I know that
but
was
yeah.
when it was released, but I think that's when it was released to like 3 theaters, and then it kind of got fucking buried until it hit HBO later that year, and then fucking it had like a resurgence where people were like, "Oh, who is this?"
Right.
Guy.
Interesting.
Because I remember seeing it on HBO like in that year and being like, "This is my favorite movie of all time," and it's still like maybe my favorite Wes Anderson movie, and just being like, how the fuck did I never hear about this before? Like it totally didn't. When I say it didn't come out, I just mean it didn't get like a release.
Megan Coleman recommended that movie to me, and from our high school days, and I rented it and then watched it like at night. And then I watched it again the next day because it was like a 2-night rental, and I watched it, and I was just like, "This is my favorite movie. This is so good."
It's so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking over the 1996 movies, this was just utter garbage year. Like amazing. Like how did Fargo not win? Like,
How did-
but
Without
we
looking
just,
at anything, and again, without doing any research, I disagree. Strongly disagree. No, I'm just.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, we're. I mean, I don't know. That's kind
A little
of
off topic.
bad about
Fargo.
that, but
Yeah.
what was I gonna say though? Have to mention Carter Burwell. Fucking
Best
the
score.
score of
Best
this
score
movie.
so far.
So
Or at least tied with
amazing.
Raising Arizona. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to beat Raising Arizona's score because that's so good. But like this one, it just sets the fucking tone.
I was gonna
so
say those
perfectly.
opening strains are like, this is a tragedy. Like from the just watching
Yeah.
the car drive, you're like, oh shit. Like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
it's coming
like
right
somehow,
yeah.
somehow you feel like all of the sadness of like living in Minnesota, and you feel like I don't know, it's so good.
at you. Depression. Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Well, let's not forget about the film editing by our friend Roderick James.
Yeah, Roderick James. Yeah,
Nominated.
AKA,
They got
who we're
nominated
talking
for it.
about how the Coens didn't want to put their name too much over the films, but it's funny actually because they were nominated for so many awards for this movie, right? Roderick James obviously was up for best film editing, and they were discussing because it's them, it's the Coen brothers, right? But they were talking about get this. Dressing up Albert Finney in disguise if they actually won for Roderick James and having
His
him go up
drag
there and
outfit
accept
from
it.
that one scene in Miller's Crossing.
That'd be so good.
That would've
A little
been perfect.
Easter egg, like, that'd be
Yeah.
so good. Oh my God. But luckily they didn't need to worry about that. But oh man.
Did it get best score? Did it get nominated for best score? I mean, it's such.
No, the only 2 Oscars it got were
Or actress
Screenplay
and
and
screenplay.
McDormand.
Yeah, it got nominated for editing, cinematography, actress, director, and picture.
The score was so
It
good.
didn't even get
though. That's so
nominated for a
weird,
score.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that's
I also noticed the
stupid
score
Oscars.
had
Why
like
are
a
we talking about
little, like speaking of like communication and like awkwardness, the score itself had like a little stutter to it that was like very reminiscent of Taxi Driver. Do you guys know the Taxi Driver score?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was like
yeah.
dun 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 dun. That one.
Oh
was the same thing, like,
yeah.
at times.
Right.
But that was. I don't know if that was like a direct influence, but I may Google it later.
Before I want to remember this note that I had written, it reminded me of Travis, you had brought up in the Miller's Crossing episode when John Turturro, Bernie goes into Miller's Crossing, and then he comes out with like this different sort of ability to kill and sort of like more harsh thing. Like there's a moment when you don't really know a lot about Carl and Gare,
Right.
but when Gare kills the cop and the blood splatters on Steve Buscemi's face, and he has this like slowed down moment. I don't know if it's actually slowed down, but it's very like surreal moment where it's the whoa, daddy,
Yeah.
whoa, daddy, and it's like he just like sees like the face of
Wasn't
the
quite that
Grim Reaper or
sensual,
God
but
or
yeah, I
whatever.
remember that.
No, it was to me. I relate to Carl, damn it. And it's like, and he sees, it's like he's like looking into the face of life and death and God and all of it, and then like after that, he's way more brutal. Like, before that, he's sort of like just like a low level thug. You kind of get the idea. But then, he kills the fucking guy in the garage later, and he kills, obviously Wade he kills. And it's like, he seems to have like the majesty of seeing death is gone after that moment. It's like invited him into this other world.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It does seem that's like a power he realizes he has, and like that's how he's going to deal with like literally every minor inconvenience for the rest of the film. Like that's his way of like mastering his like domain, and like everybody's trying to like, I don't know, be in control of their life, or you know what I mean, like get something. I don't know. I do think that line at the end of the movie is like really important, where she's like, all for a little bit of money. I think that is like, there is like a class consciousness to their movie, and like the amount of money that they're trying to get from this job is like not even that much. Like them splitting the full 80,000 is like not that much for killing like 10 people. And like, I mean, Steve Buscemi does feel like he's in a panic too, and he's just like on a spree.
Right. I think that is, I mean, I kind of mentioned in the intro, but like, I think that her saying, what are you doing this for? Like, all for just a little bit of money. Like, there's more to life than a little bit of money. And then like how she kind of just like looks forward and says, I just don't understand it. Like that to me is like, the whole point of doing this was kind of trying to figure out like what the Coen brothers like philosophy is. And watching this one, I kind of don't think that it's like the nihilism that they get painted with as much as it is just that like he's, especially Ethan Coen, who was like the philosophy major, and like it's really just him like trying to figure out like all throughout so many of these movies, like what the fuck is this like evil in the world? Like I don't understand it.
Can I just say though, like it's not, there's more to life than a little bit of money, but then like when the last scene, right, where she and her husband are talking about his painting getting on the stamp, it's all about like, no, people need 3 cents because the price of postage goes up, and it's like you need that 3 cents, and it's like holy shit, like this the life does kind of hinge on those little like a little bit of money, literally.
Great point.
Yeah, it is. The class consciousness thing, I thought of this, I forgot to write it down, but we always, Chris has brought it up, and we always end up talking about it, the people behind desks thing,
Yes.
And who that is in this movie is, I mean, there's Wade and Stan, right? Stan?
Yes.
But really, it's, and by the way, I fucking love Stan. I think that character is like, so just like, they don't fucking give him any story, but you're like, yeah, that's who that guy is. But
he's like the parrot to Wade, he's like the parrot on his shoulder.
But really, it's like, as opposed to Hudsucker Proxy, where like the man behind the desk is like absolute like corporate America, like big fucking, like very real like analogy of like dealing with the man.
Power.
The man in this is fucking Jerry, and he's like this sad sack employee of the month fucking low level guy. And it's like, I don't know, it was really interesting to see like as all the moments when he's behind the desk, whether it's like trying to rip people off for true coding, being like,
Yeah. He was also handed that position by his father-in-law too, which I think is worth mentioning.
And it really does, like that spoke to like, to me, like this behind the desk moment to me was really them like talking about like the class consciousness thing, but also of just like how like the fucking grubbiness of power, and how like, it's just fucking people like trying to like hold on to any kind of fucking power over you that they have and just fucking you over. I don't know. It's really like,
but he's also like scheming. Like he also wants something more. There's like something in him that's like striving, you know what I mean? And I think that has to do with like, again, being handed that position, but wanting more and not being able to do it. Like he's a certain kind of guy from the opening of the movie, where he's never going to be like his father-in-law.
God, I wish that we would have just spent the whole hour talking about his performance, because it is so fucking good.
That smile in the opening scene where he tries for like 1 second just to be like, hey, but then it like disappears. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, and he's like, rehearsing on the phone with his dad or his father-in-law, and he's just like, oh geez, we got a problem. And then he calls and it's an assistant. He's like, oh, wait, Gustafson, please.
Yeah,
It's
that's a
like,
great moment.
it's so good.
Yeah.
It's like every moment that he does is like, so it's not manic the way that Steve Buscemi is. It's manic in the way that like, you just feel that weight of like, this guy is fucking buried and like trying to claw his way out. And it's awkward and gross and like, ugh.
Too much. I've never watched that movie again. It was great though.
Are we rating it?
Shall we rate?
Anybody got anything else they want to say about it?
I just love this movie. I'm so glad we finally got to talk about it. I'm
Yeah,
pumped
it was
about
fun.
the stretch.
I did mention like it's the aesthetic that I think that people think of when they think of the Coen brothers.
And how would you
Maybe
define that
I'm
aesthetic?
wrong.
Because I think it's like a bleak, naturalistic noir movie. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like where you have these like figures on this just like desolate landscape. I don't know. Like
Yeah,
but
there's no
it's-
way. I think that like the thing that they don't like that people say about them, which is like, whatever, fuck them. But like it's that like they don't like the quirky like thing being put onto them, where it's like the characters are all a little quirky. That's definitely a part of it. Like there's no doubt that like it's cartoonish the way that we've talked about. Like they hire these very cartoonish looking people, but then
Are they
put
cartoonish or are they
them
like normal looking people? You know what I mean? Like they're
I don't
they're
think Steve Buscemi's
exaggerated,
normal
but
looking. Like there's no way that like Steve Buscemi is normal looking. No fucking way.
yeah,
Like,
he's a little
like-
Peter Laurie-ish. Yeah.
And then, it's not just him. I mean, Frances McDormand is normal looking. And like going back to Blood Simple, like, her boyfriend, whatever that guy's name was, Ray, was normal looking.
Yeah, yeah.
But like, they cast it like, especially in the periphery. I think where it doesn't work is in like, we're going to talk about Oh Brother in a couple of movies. And I actually love that movie probably more than you guys do. But where it doesn't work for me, like in hindsight, is when they have like, the guy coming up with his buck tooth being like, and stay out of the Woolworths. It's like, then you're just like, that's not real. Like it only works when it's in like a real moment. Otherwise it does feel quirky, like for
Yeah.
the sake of quirky.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
So, but I don't know. I think that like they paint their movies with like realism, but with like cartoonish realism. So I don't know. Maybe that's somewhere in there. I don't know. This one definitely feels like I don't think of the Hudsucker Proxy when I think of like what is a Coen Brothers movie.
Yeah.
know?
I agree.
I'll start rating if you
Rank
want. I
'em,
think we all
rank 'em.
know. Number
What you
one,
got? Hit me.
Fargo. Number 2, Raising Arizona. Number 3, Blood Simple. Number 4, Barton Fink. Number 5, what's it called? Hudsucker Proxy. Oh, Miller's Crossing. Did I say that?
Nope.
You didn't say Miller's Crossing.
That was, damn it. I have it written down. It's after Raising Arizona,
Cool.
before
number
Blood Simple.
3. Okay. 4. Whatever.
3.
3. 1.
Chris, you go.
Yeah, for me, Fargo, number 1, clearly. Number 2, Blood Simple. Number 3, Raising Arizona. Number 4, Hudsucker Proxy. Number 5, Miller's Crossing. Number 6, Barton Fink. We have a new number 1, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, I'm gonna be the odd one out. I'm gonna say Raising Arizona is still my favorite. I think I like it more as a Coen Brothers movie because I think it embraces that like weirdness and that quirkiness. And I love Fargo, but like Blood Simple, it almost feels like someone else with just a really good eye could have like made the observations that they did. You know what I mean? Like I think there's a few like stylish moments in Fargo where you're like, wow, I don't know if anybody else could have done that, but in Raising Arizona, from front like top to bottom, that's just like a work of genius to me. I'm not saying it's better. I'm just saying for me, like I could watch like Raising Arizona like every day. You know what I mean? Fargo is like a really special movie. I mean, I wouldn't change one thing about it, but it's like
That's the thing,
it's painful to watch and it's like not as thrilling.
Fucking shift. Like we talked, we've done this before where we plus up the movie a little bit.
Yeah.
And I cannot plus this movie up. Like if we want to talk about, we didn't really, there's Shep Proudfoot and there's Mike, Yamaguchi or whatever his name is. Yamagita. And, those are the only people of color in the movie,
And the black neighbor who lives next to him who knocks on the door and gets beaten up by Shep.
Oh,
That
right.
neighbor is
Oh,
black.
yeah, right.
So you have no...
So they do that. I mean, I think like obviously, I don't know what Brainerd, like in North Dakota, is like,
Yeah.
or what,
More
like,
people of color than New York City, according to the photos.
so it's you give it a little bit of a pass the same way you do Raising Arizona, and they do throw in Shep Proudfoot, and like they do whatever, but like to give like a realistic who might live in the neighborhood, but it's still, we've talked about like you have a like responsibility as a filmmaker to sort of like be more inclusive, and this doesn't. I don't know. I guess it does. I forgot about the neighbor.
I did. Well,
I'm
but
not even
again,
gonna try to
the
fuss
neighbor
it out.
living in like kind of the slums, right? And then that brought up a question for me where it's like the only people of color are living kind of on the outskirts of this town.
Yeah.
Again, that could be very realistic to the time and place. But it does feel like when when the predominant stories in Hollywood are being told by white people about white people,
right,
then it the end result of that is like these are people of color in movies, which is like extremely unfortunate. So but it's hard to like it's hard to again, it's hard to say like that this movie did something wrong by like identifying like the makeup of a culture in a very broad
there's also not
sense,
a lot of characters,
exactly,
there's like a handful of characters in the movie, so it's
Jose Feliciano is in the movie.
Yeah.
That's true.
Played by himself apparently.
That.
Bruce Campbell's in it for a split second.
Yes,
Anyway.
through
saw
the
that.
aesthetic. Yes.
Yeah, again, I'm sorry.
Not a person of color.
Finish
Not a person of color. But
Right, true.
Finish
Good
ranking,
point.
Travis.
Good point. We're not
okay,
about
sorry.
to
Raising
guys.
Arizona is my favorite. Fargo's, I mean, a perfect movie, and it's like I don't really like it any less than Raising Arizona, but I'm going to put it under number 2 because it's just like I don't feel it's close to it. Mm-hmm. These are all again my personal loves, not necessarily like critical evaluations. Number 3 is Blood Simple still, and number 4 is a tie between Miller's Crossing, Barton Fink, and Hudsucker Proxy, which are all great in their way, but yeah.
Fair enough.
They're all they've all been good so far in my like estimation. Like
I mean, we're hitting this stride that they are hitting this stride now after that one, where the next one's Big Lebowski. Mm-hmm. Big Lebowski was supposed to come first, and I think it would have like been terrible for them if it had. They had the script in hand. They were just waiting for Jeff Bridges.
Interesting.
Yeah. And thank God they didn't, because they were coming off of such a critical failure with Hudsucker that like Big Lebowski was not the next movie for them. Like it was so hard to like grasp. I fucking love it. Obviously, I can't wait to watch it this week. And like, I think there's going to be a battle for number 1. I don't think that this one's going to be it necessarily. I know it would be for a lot of people. I think the battle is coming in 10 years with No Country, but we'll see. And also my spoiler alert that maybe Inside Llewyn Davis might be my number 1.
What?
But we'll see.
Oh, we got to get into this. Oh, man.
But this run that they hit right now with, Fargo and then Big Lebowski and then like, Oh Brother was really big for them. They're like in their stride in a lot of ways, or in a new stride for them.
Yeah.
That sort of peters out after that again. And then they have to rebuild again. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah. Interesting.
Pumped.
Well, yeah, excited to get into it with you guys. Excited to watch Big Lebowski for sure.
Oh, yeah. Always a pleasure, you guys.
All right.
Until next time.
Thank you for listening to Auteur Detour. We'll see you again next week.